So the Admiral closed up his introduction, his introductory talk to us, and with that, the police trooper welcomed us aboard, and was very short and very distinct and very clear in what he said to us, that and what was expected of us, and that there's a wrong way, the Navy way of doing things, and that he, whereas he wished us well, he was sorry that so many of the faces he's looking at now would not be there at graduation. And he reiterated what the Admiral had said, that it was their position to put us through 13 weeks of a lot of bashing, and it's going to be tremendously competitive, and that he knows that there will be some in this class, that there will be quite a few in this class that will not be able to go forward into other training. And he did, however, wish us well, and that he hoped that we were there and could understand why the severity of this program was going to be as tight as it was, and that the objectives were very high, and the standards were extremely high, and there was a very good reason and purpose for this. And again, he wished us well, and that was it. We all stood up, and he took off, and then we all lined up again, went back to our rooms, and we got started with this program. Our platoon leader took a little bit of time and had us relax a little bit, and he explained just what kind of outlined our program for us, how life would be there, and what we were supposed to do, and reviewed, and then at this point he wanted to know. He said, "You've got a pretty blunt and a pretty rushed introduction into this, and are there any questions? You can feel free to ask any questions you want." And several of us had asked about this or asked about that, and it was all strange to us, all brand new type of life, and we kind of broke up, and I guess it was getting to be about time for reveille. We'd already been to chow, and we'd gone through all that, so the next morning, reveille, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and whammo! This is the way the Navy was, and you're out of the sack, and you're down into the head, and there's room for about 40 or 50 or 60 cadets down there, and you shave and shower and take care of everything, and you get on back, you get dressed, and you're just finishing getting dressed, and the bugle's calling you in the hallway for the lineup again, and we go rushing out there and stand to, and we go over the roster, and we run off to class. And this was how it went. And of course, in class, you had a certain procedure. When you were called upon, you'd get yourself out of the seat, stand straight as you could, and answer any question that was asked you, and that's it, and that's it alone. You didn't dally or dilly about wander off on things. You answered the question just exactly the way he wanted it answered, and that was all. So we went on like that. Just a very long day. You get off to chow, and through with chow, you're off to ground school. You're doing 4 or 5 classes in the morning. You had chow. You're back. You had 10 minutes. I can't remember now if it was 5 or 10 minutes for a little rest, and then you get into your sports shirts, and off you'd go. And you were always told what was going to be going on, so you could get into the right uniform. And they told you what uniform to get into because they didn't expect you to know. And that consisted of looking out over the parade grounds. We could see beyond the parade grounds where all the obstacle courses and everything were. We were in the 2nd Battalion, so they were still building this place. They were in a rush to get pilots, but they were not in a rush to shove you through. They had, as they had indicated to us, that they had a very strong program. And we learned right away doing the obstacle course, for example, that you got to buddy up. They had this great big wall down there that you could never get over by yourself, so they wanted you to use your own ingenuity, and we figured out that 3 cadets, you could jump up on one and get up on the other guy could get over the top and then lean back and pull you up, and it was all teamwork. You could not go through the program trying to be a lone eagle and doing everything yourself. There was a very good reason for that. You're going to be flying with people, you're going to be you're going to need them, they're going to need you, and if you try to do it by yourself, you're out. And there are plenty of indications of that going through the program, that where you'd go swimming, for example, and you'd never go into a pool alone. You'd always have a buddy. And if you didn't see that head on your buddy in 2 seconds, you're under the water looking for him, and he's doing the same for you. Taking all the courses we did and all the activities we had to participate in our field training, I felt real sorry for a lot of the kids who had never been around the water, because our water, of course, going into the Navy, the water program was extremely important. You're going to be over water 95% of the time. So everything was competitive. I'm bringing this up because there was competition between your classmates, your roommates. There was competition between squads. There was competition between the platoons. There was competition between the companies. And you were graded by your aggressiveness and your persistence, your originality. And this whole thing was just based on you just doing everything you could, and the best you could, and as long as you could, and as hard as you could. So in swimming, as I was really alluding to, some of these kids who'd never been around water had it very rough. In fact, I'd say cruel. You had 3 chances at everything. Most of the time, you knew right from wrong. And in disciplinary things, you weren't allowed sometimes three chances. But in something that you didn't know or you weren't very proficient at, you were given 3 chances. And some of those kids would go down once, you were learning how to swim, and you had to learn how to swim very fast because the program was extremely accelerated. And I saw kids go down once, saw them go down twice, and the third time the instructor would put a bamboo pole down, heavier than a bamboo fishing pole, and he'd push that down, and the cadet would, try to reach for it. And I saw those kids come out of the water. You could actually see their ankles. They were just flying out of the water trying to get at that, and gasping, and just wild with fear. And several kids were washed out on their inability to pass the swimming tests. You had a university-sized pool, and you're required to swim underwater one length of it, and if you could turn around underwater and swim back part way, you'd be given extra points. We also had this mock-up of a cockpit sitting on rails 40, 50 feet in the air, and it'd strap you in with your shoulder and your lap harness, your lap belt, and it dropped this thing into the water. You go down about 10, 12 feet, and then you were supposed to very calmly open the hatch, undo your harnesses and your seat belt, and then swim out of there and get up to the edge of the pool in a certain length of time. And this was a bad one. There was a lot of kids that would get claustrophobia when they got in the water with a hood over them. The only thing I was thinking about when that thing hit the water was to get the hell out of it as fast as I could and get back up there, because this was that's your natural instinct. They had another cute little thing. They had a 75-foot tower there that we'd all climb up, and then they'd have in this case we were dressed in our khakis. By the way, our uniforms had come through, and we had fittings on that, and they were all great. So you climb up there in your khakis and shoes on. You put a Mae West on. You know what a Mae West is. You put it over your head. You have a strap that goes around under your crotch and it fixes, and also a waist belt. It ties to two little CO2 bottles on the left and right that you would pull to inflate. And you'd be up there with your Mae West, and they would tell you to point your toes, cross your legs, and point your toes, and then jump off. And of course, a lot of kids were, and we included, were just scared to death that high in the air. And the instructors showed us how to do it. And the reason we did it with clothes on is the fact that if you're on a carrier and it is hit, you're not going to be in your bathing suit. So it was required that we do this with our clothes on. And then you'd simply swim over to the side of the pool. And that was all well and good. But one fellow forgot to point his toes, and he hit the water so hard that his shoes came right off. And of course, he had to repeat that. Another jerk forgot to cross his legs, and that had to be, as tragic as it was really funny, because that guy's crotch was burning and aching for days after that. And he came around, he told us guys, God, whatever you do, cross your legs when you jump off. So there was some humor in everything that we did. You try to look at the good side of it. You've all been in a field house, you know how high that is. We had about 30 or 40 ropes hanging down, tow ropes, big heavy tow ropes, with a knot about every 10, 12 feet. And there'd be instructors down along the base, and you'd be there, and they'd have their stopwatches. They'd call your name out, you'd come forward, and you'd have a certain length of time that you could climb up to the top. You had a horn up on top, and you had to push a button to make the horn work to prove that you got up there. And a lot of guys, I got weak arms, but boy, those arms got strong when we got to that test. And up you go. And you had to do it. I can't remember. I think it was somewhere between 30 and 40 seconds we had to be up there. And some of the cadets had tried once, and they didn't make it. And some could even get only halfway up, and then, they were doing the best they could and working as hard at it. And then you had your second chance to try it, and then the next day you were allowed to get your third chance. If you didn't get it up on the third time, you didn't get up the top, you're washed out. And they were real strong. There wasn't too much give and take. You couldn't accumulate too many demerits before you were in trouble. I can't remember the number exactly now, it's so many years ago, but the whole point is that everything that we were doing was being done for a purpose. And I can see now later on that everything we did was necessary. Again, the gentleman thing started to come through different from an enlisted boot camp, in that at the Marine Corps boot camp you're given an 84-pound backpack that's fully loaded. At that time, World War II, it was. The backpack we had was 22 pounds. And they made it clear that we weren't training oxmen, and we weren't preparing you guys to be, over the valley and over the hill, and type of manual labor. But with this 22-pound backpack, we have our program. So we're going to do a little more running with that than they say they do with the 84-pound one. So with 22 pounds, they figured that 22 miles. With 22 pounds, that was easy to figure out. So we'd go out on our little field trips. And the field trips didn't consist of a pith helmet, shorts, and a butterfly net. Their idea was kind of like Boppy's old horses. You'd walk, and then you would trot, and then you would run. And we did this at regular intervals, so everything was done on a time basis. And of course, our platoon was up against the other platoons, and we had moved ourselves from 4th up to 3rd, up to 2nd platoon as far as our academic and our sports activities were concerned. So this is what I bring out again, all these activities, all this competitiveness that was going on constantly. We got back after a real full day. I remember one time, and it was, we had our showers and we finished our homework and we dove in the sack, and 2 o'clock in the morning the bugles blowing reveille. We had to stand out, and we couldn't figure this out. So the mic comes on, and the bugle's blaring, and the yacht stops, and Ensign Benson gets on and said for our company to break out and stand inspection in Class A uniform. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's raining cats and dogs. And so we thought, geez, here we got our uniforms all brushed, and they're pretty, and the visors have been shined up. Our shoes are just shining. You can see your face in the shoes. God, and so we put on our Class A uniforms, go out there in the rain, and we have roll call, and 3 guys from our platoon are missing. So he puts it, we're at parade rest, and darker than hell, wind's blowing, and raining like mad, and the officer comes back in, and he checks these 3 cadets and breaks them out, and the one cadet thought he was being smarter to stay in. He was trying to con the officer. He thought he was smarter. He was using his head more by staying in rather than wrecking the uniform. And he got about halfway through this excuse, and he was told to stand at attention, and they called for a chief, and then he went down to brig, and he was out of there. And then the other 2 guys, the same thing. They just thought it was ridiculous to get up there in the middle of the night and put on a Class A uniform and go stand out in the rain. I mean, that's a dumb thing to do, and that's the last thing they ever said as a cadet. So those 3 guys were marched off the brig. They were put into the bell bottoms and shipped off the next day. The idea behind all this, of course, was that the Navy had a very good reason for ordering you out there, and you were in no position to contest your order, and and as a naval officer, you shouldn't contest your orders. You're supposed to obey and on time and do precisely as you're told. And that's exactly why these 3 cadets were washed out, because they didn't obey orders, which of course is your basic mandatory, the thing that you learn. It's the first thing you have to do. So this went on, and now we got to the point where we had about 4 or 5 weeks there, and we had our first leave. Sometimes the parents would come down and see some of the cadets. Mom and Dad didn't get a chance to come on down. They were pretty busy up there. A lot of things going on, I guess, with Raleigh and that. But I had a couple girlfriends come down, and we weren't allowed to leave Iowa City proper. And like I said, there's no overnights. So Spud and I went in on our first little leave there, and we walk into town. Of course, everybody in town was pretty proud of having us there, and we must have brought a lot of money into the town. But they were very happy to see us there, and of course the town, Iowa, is dry. You can't get any beer, you can't get any booze, and on top of that, I believe it was a Sunday, and we've got until like 9 o'clock that night before we have to go for bed check. So Spud and I were looking up and down, and there's no place to go, and we come by this little tea room. So we walk into the tea room, and it's very fancy. They got little doilies here, and the curtains are on the windows, and there's nice cute little napkins and demitasse cups, and there's a grandmother and a mother and a daughter that run this place. And of course the old women that are in this place are kind of looking at us, and here we've been out, for these weeks, basically, on a tiger program, and anything that you grab, you hang on for dear life, or anything that you're given to you, you try to break or hang on to dear life, and then here we're sitting in this cutesy little tea room. So the mother comes over and says, could she help us? And she was so proud to have the, the Navy cadets in town. And we're real proud to be here too, ma'am. And wondering what you had on the in the beverage department. She said, well, we have tea and we have coffee, Coca-Cola, and we look up there and he says, is that all we have? We've been kind of going at it here for about 4 or 5 weeks, ma'am, and we sure appreciate it if you could come up with something here, because this is our first leave, that we've had. So she said, well, let me see what I can do. And she goes back and she talks to her mother, the grandmother, and they're kind of giggling and laughing. And pretty soon she comes back with these 2 little teacups, and I take a swig of it, and wow! Holy cow, and my eyeballs smack into my nose. And she's put a little touch of bourbon in this with some Coca-Cola. And she puts her finger up to her lips as if to say, shh, and so we said, we beckoned her over, and we couldn't thank her enough. And it's absolutely secret. We won't tell anybody about it, and we didn't. And so whenever we would get a leave at the end, as we got to be into the middle of the program, we were getting, an afternoon off or a morning off, and we'd always go for the afternoons. And a lot of fellows there just didn't have anything to do during the day off, so they would, when they had a liberty, so they just got kind of like going to the library or something. But Spud and I couldn't quite cut that program, because we had enough of that place for 6 days. And so we used to go back and see that. And this is where we had to use a lot of ingenuity, because when the girlfriends came down, they came down separately, of course, and one didn't know the other. And so with no overnights and limited situation all the way around, we had to really use our ingenuity, what with the girls being as dignified and as bashful and a great deal different than the morals are today. We brought the girlfriends. I brought the girlfriend in, in with Spud, and we went in there and we got our special little tea, and we kind of worked things out with the gal in charge. So they had this back room there, and everything worked out pretty good. And I hope the 2 girlfriends had a good time. I sure did. And then anyway, back on that, we went into the programs, and they, the hikes got longer and the runs got longer, and we had a lot of things like we had 100-yard dashes and 440s and 880s, and we had relay teams, and I was the cleanup man on our relay team, which I was proud to be. And then we were getting extra points because our relay team was doing real good, and our swimming team, we broke up into teams on that, and we were doing real great with our swimming. We had some of these guys that could really do the crawl, and another guy that was really great at backstroke, and we all operated as a team, so our overall scores were getting up there pretty good. We never did make first platoon, but we were just about ready to crack them. And the whole point of this program started to come clear to us of what we were doing here, and what the officers and instructors hadn't told us was what I guess was really important. And what we were finding out about ourselves is that we could do so much more than we ever thought we could, and we had gained such a confidence in ourselves, through hand-to-hand jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, and with those 6-foot sticks, I forget what they call it, some kind of a Japanese thing. We had masks on for it, but it was intensely interesting because, God, I was swimming faster than I ever had, and further than I ever had, and I run faster, and as a team we were working, and we there were so many things. There were just bundles of things we were doing every day that we never thought we could ever do. and we were accomplishing things we couldn't do. And this rubbed off in ground school too. We were covering subjects and memorizing theories and going through navigational programs and Morse code, learning all the flags of the Navy and all the background from John Paul Jones on. And we were having tests on this, and you didn't want to get, if you got below 3, they would mark your grade. You had to have 2.5, but if you got below 3 point, they marked your grade in a different color pencil. And if you got about 3 point, that's what you always wanted to do, and be as close as you could to 4 point, 100%. So it was great. You know, you'd sit back and think, good night. You know, I'm kind of proud of me. I'm really getting. I never thought I could do half these things, and this is what the United States Navy wanted, for you to get a supreme confidence in yourself. And I think the best example was like Forrest Abishesky would stand there with a .45 or a knife, and we were to attack him and disarm him and get him down on the deck and put a certain hold on him without following through. And the whole idea was to disarm a person that has a weapon and kill him within 32 seconds. And whereas you don't think that that's not much of an accomplishment in the peacetime world, but it's a whale of an accomplishment when you're being transformed from easy, trusting, caring, ordinary young man, and transforming you in someone that has a lot of confidence and being tremendously aggressive. And they succeeded in doing that. That was very, very, very good, and it was very inspirational, and a lot of patriotism there. We would fall out every Sunday when all the girlfriends and families came down. Would have this review, and it was very stirring. They'd be playing the Navy hymn and Anchors Aweigh and all these big marches, and you'd be very proud that you had accomplished this. And we'd go by the review stand, and sometimes there'd be a visiting admiral in there, and your eyes right and the whole shot, and it was good. At night you'd hear taps and the lowering of the flag, and it was just you were starting to get later on what we would know as esprit de corps, and you never did anything alone. You always were a team of either 2 or 4 or 6, whatever the situation called for. So we went through the program there and completed that and graduated, and at a ceremony that was very, very rewarding. The admiral and the Navy captain addressed us, and our platoon, I think, had shrunk from a 48 down to a 34, and down to about 28. I think we came out of there with 28. But now we felt that no matter where we went, it couldn't be any worse than this. But I have to say that all through there, as I say, there was no profanity, except when a couple of instructors couldn't contain themselves. And coming from a sports background, you could understand. But it was a wonderful experience. Like Forrest Abishesky looked like an ape, and he fought like one. And it's either you or the other guy, and this was starting to come into us that it's either kill or be killed, and this was coming home. But always at flavor, and always at breakfast or lunch or dinner, that you'd have that steward that would serve you the coffee, that would serve you the water and the butter, and you were to be understood and impressed with the fact that you were working your way towards being a gentleman. And they did an excellent job. I can't think of anything else that would be noteworthy all through that. Of course, I had shin splints, and in the water, they had to get into the whirlpool